Hi everyone, welcome to my first ever YouTube channel. If you're discovering this, well done. YouTube knows you have great taste. However you are finding this, thank you so much for stopping by. I really appreciate it. My name is Sarah and the tagline for this channel is Reads and Reflections. Reads because I'm planning to talk about the books that I'm reading, and reflections is more on the things that I'm thinking about, drawing on some of the big themes of life that I hope will nourish you and provide some food for thought. So if that sounds like something you might be interested in, please go on and hit that subscribe button and let's talk about books and reflect together. I am back from work and I've made a cup of tea. I've got my candles on, I've got the incense on because it is cold outside, but I thought it would be a perfect time to film my first video. And I thought we'd start off with some books. And instead of doing the kind of usual booktube tag, I thought it would be quite fun to introduce myself through some books. And so I have made some categories and I've chosen some books and I'll just talk about them. I have to say I haven't planned any of this, so beyond making the categories and selecting a couple of quotes, but I haven't read some of these books in a couple of years, so we'll see how this goes. But I hope by the end of this you have a better sense of me and who I am, and also you've got some juicy book recommendations as well. So the first category is what I'm currently reading, and I am reading Journal of a Solitude by May Sarton. I love thinking about solitude and interiority and the inner realm of the home, and so this felt like a perfect book for me. And I have to say, it's a perfect book for January as well, when it is so cold and you sort of want to be hibernating indoors. So far, I'm only 100 pages or so in, but she's reflecting on what it means to live a life of solitude, on the seasons, on what it means to be an artist, on what it means to be a woman and an artist. There are just some really beautiful passages in here. I've taken one from the first page that I thought would be nice to read, that I feel like sets the tone for the book. So she says, "Begin here. It is raining. I look out on the maple where a few leaves have turned yellow and listen to Punch, the parrot, talking to himself and to the rain tickling gently against the windows. I am here alone for the first time in weeks to take up my real life again, at last. That is what is strange, that friends, even passionate love, are not my real life unless there is time alone in which to explore and to discover what is happening or has happened. Without the interruptions, nourishing and maddening, this life would become arid. Yet I taste it fully only when I am alone here, and the house and I resume old conversations." So that is Journal of a Solitude by May Sarton. Definitely a great book for winter. The next book I have on my list is, what was this category? This is my favourite read from last year, and I realised picking this up now that I don't think this was my favourite read, though I did enjoy it, but I think this is the book that I'm thinking about the most. I Who Have Never Known Men by Jacqueline Harpman, and translated by Roz Schwartz, tells the story of 39 women and our nameless narrator, who at the beginning of the book is an adolescent, and throughout the book she matures into adulthood and then into old age. It tells the story of their life held in a bunker underground in an unknown location, and the women escape, and it then tells the story of their survival in this new outside world. I won't say too much about what happens in the book because in many ways not much happens. It's really the sort of meditations that is where this book's riches lie. For me, it is a very existential novel that is asking the question of, like, what does it mean to be human? what does it mean to be human in a context that strips you of your humanity and the possibilities for you to realize your humanity. And within that, there are so many thoughts and reflections and ideas around language, the possibility for languaging emotions. So the narrator sometimes struggles to know what she feels like because she just doesn't have the language for it. There are a lot of reflections about time and memory and knowledge and wisdom and some of the power dynamics that occur there. So, for example, this unnamed narrator is significantly younger than the other women, and there's a tussle that happens between them around her wanting to know about this previous life that they lived and them withholding some of that information, and whether that is just because they feel like she doesn't need it, or whether there's also an element of sort of trauma there about this past life that broke from them in such a sudden and devastating rupture. I really enjoyed the reflections about the body in this book as well. The body becomes a site of rebellion and resistance. It's a site of wisdom. It's a site of measuring time. There's a beautiful section where the women make their own time because the unnamed narrator has been metering out time using her heartbeat. And because they're kept underground, they have no sense of when day or night is. So when the guards tell them to eat or to sleep, they have no idea if that actually accords with when breakfast or lunchtime or dinner might be, or when daytime or nighttime is. And once they discover that the unnamed narrator has meted out time, they all get in on it and they're asking, what's the time now? And they're making jokes about the fact that the guards might be putting them to bed when it's 8 o'clock in the morning for them, according to their time. And the unnamed narrator says, that rekindled a spirit of rebellion in their dulled minds. We had our own time, which had nothing in common with that of those who kept us locked up. We'd rediscovered the quality of being human. So that is I Who Have Never Known Men by Jacqueline Harpman. The next book we have up is Sula by Toni Morrison. A few years ago, I decided to read a Toni Morrison a year, and Sula is the second Toni Morrison book that I've read. And Sula has my heart as a book. I don't think it is the most accomplished or challenging of Toni Morrison's work that I've read so far, but it really resonated with me. I think in part because I love a story about friendship. There is a major transgression that happens within that friendship, and the way that the two women talk about it just says so much about their own understandings of what it means to be in relation and in community with one another. That gets me all the time. Morrison is really exploring themes around self and community, and what does it look like to be a woman, a black woman who isn't living to the standards and expectations of her community and of society, community judgment and morality and social norms. I haven't actually said what it's about. So it tells the story of two friends, Sula and Nell, who live in a town called The Bottom, which is in Ohio. And the book is structured into two parts. Part one follows Sula and Nell in sort of childhood, adolescence, but really it's the part of the book that sets the scene around sort of The Bottom, some of the other characters within the community. And then part two, Sula has been away and she comes back and she's gone out and done things, and Nell has stayed in the community and has been shaped by it much more than Sula has been. And we then see their relationship from that point onwards as well. Did I say what category this book was? I think I said this was a book that I was most likely to gift. I've gifted this so many times, and if I haven't gifted it, it's because usually the person already has the book. The next category is the book that I would most like to reread. That is At Night All Blood is Black by David Diop and translated by Anna Moschovakis, I believe her name is. So At Night All Blood is Black tells the story of Alpha and Mademba. They are friends, but they describe themselves, or Alpha describes Mademba as his more than brother. That is how close they are. And the two of them are Senegalese boys who get sent to fight for France in the First World War. Mademba is killed by artillery, and that leaves Alpha alone in a strange country with strange people in war. We meet him at the point where he is reeling from not only Mademba's death, but also the actions that he has taken to avenge his death, his friend's death, but also to process his grief and his fast declining mental health. This book is very slim, but is so powerful in the way that it sort of humanizes and makes real the lives of, you know, a single person who fought for France and lost somebody that was family to him, and what that means for one's psyche and sort of position in the world. You know, a book shouldn't be judged just on the basis of how much it moves you, but I think it's just so beautifully written and affecting. Let's take a tea break. I've been talking so much. The next category is my favourite childhood read. For that, I have Purple Hibiscus. I feel like Purple Hibiscus is Chimamanda's underrated read. People talk about Half of the Yellow Sun, which I think is her best work. People talk about Americana, which I think is her worst work. But people don't really talk about Purple Hibiscus. This is Chimamanda's first novel, and it tells the story of Kambili, who is a 15-year-old living in a patriarchal Christian household, but the family in general lives under a very oppressive environment. And this is then mirrored in the wider socio-political context of oppression within Nigeria at the time that the book is written. I read this book probably about the age of 14 or 15, and I think I saw a lot of myself in Kambili. She is a very studious, heads down kind of girl who is incredibly observant and sensitive, but doesn't always feel like she has the agency or the language to be able to express how she feels or what she's noticing. I mean, lifestyle wise, you know, our lives were very different, but there is something about sort of being a young black girl who is very sensitive but doesn't always have an avenue of expression. I read this book probably once a year. It's also a sort of source of inspiration for me with my own writing as well. And so I return to it often for that reason too. I think we're halfway. The next category is the author I fell in love with most recently, and that is Jamaica Kincaid. Jamaica Kincaid stands, rise up. Let's find one another. Wow, what to say about Jamaica Kincaid? It's rare that I read so much of one author in a year. I read Annie John. I read the autobiography of my mother. I read a few of her short stories, watched interviews, and I also bought her memoir about her garden called My Garden, I think it is. Where to begin with Jamaica Kincaid? Her sentences are sublime. She has a way of moving from the mundane to the magnificent in a clause. And why I think it's so affecting is a lot of her work circles the same themes: adolescence, coming of age, mother-daughter relationships, familial dynamics, especially like some of these moments, particularly around adolescence. You do move from the really insignificant to these hugely existential questions in just a moment. And her writing really captures that largeness and smallness of life. I wanted to just read, and I mentioned this first page. I've sent it to so many people because I am obsessed. I think about this first paragraph so often because I don't think I have been knocked by a first paragraph like this from a book for a very long time. But this is from the autobiography of my mother. The main character, Zuela Claudette Richardson, is 70 years old and she is reflecting on her life. She opens the book saying, "My mother died at the moment I was born, and so for my whole life there was nothing standing between myself and eternity. At my back was always a bleak black wind. I could not have known at the beginning of my life that this would be so. I only came to know this in the middle of my life, just at the time when I was no longer young and realized that I had less of some things that I used to have in abundance and more of some of the things I had scarcely had at all. And this realization of loss and gain made me look backward and forward. At my beginning was this woman whose face I had never seen, but at my end was nothing, no one between me and the black room of the world. I came to feel that for my whole life I had been standing on the precipice, that my loss had made me vulnerable, hard and helpless. On knowing this, I became overwhelmed with sadness and shame and pity for myself." What to say? She's fantastic. I'm going to link the Louisiana Channel interview with her because I think that is a very lovely one to watch. I don't know how long I've been talking for at this point. I hope it's been interesting. My favourite as a collection is Things I Have Withheld by Kai Miller. This is such a beautiful collection of essays. The opening framing of the book is around silences, and I read this book a couple of years ago, so I'm going on my sort of body memory of it. But that is really the reflections about the body and what does it mean to be a certain type of body in different spaces, what values and labels are put on your body, what does it give you access to, what do people expect of you, what do you invite or repel by being in a certain body. There is so much tenderness and inquiry and probing and so much love as well. Miller is talking about talking to and in conversation with some of his favourite writers like James Baldwin and Binyavanga Waina. He has this beautiful essay about boys on the harbour who are young boys who exist on the fringes of society and in a sort of liminal space. They're seen as a sort of scourge, but they have found this community and they love one another and fight for one another and have made a way when society would not give them one. This is another one that I definitely want to reread. He says, "When I talk about a place where our bodies make sense, what I really mean is a place where our bodies are not seen, where they raise no questions, where they are not worth pondering." That's Things I Have Withheld. My favourite poetry collection, by Victoria Adkuwei Bulley. Victoria is a fantastic poet. I had a couple of her pamphlets before and I was eagerly waiting this collection and I was so grateful to be able to hear her speak about it. Quiet draws on the work of an African-American English literature professor, Kevin Everard Quashie, and he has written a book called The Sovereignty of Quiet, which I also have here. And his central argument is that Blackness is understood in terms of its expressiveness, and that expressiveness is often something that is read for a public space. So it is outward, it is loud, it is visible, seen, and he offers an alternative reading, which is that, one, what does Black interiority look like as a site of resistance, but also that even within public displays of sort of resistance, that there is still an interior space or gesture that is being made. And so in Quiet, that book is one of many jumping off points, because this is a very fluid collection of poems that goes from the personal and intimate through to the historical, through to the socio-political context, through to sort of theory, philosophy. There's so much to gain from this in reading, thinking about Black womanhood, selfhood, Black interiority. What does quiet mean? How is quiet different from silence? What can be found in the quiet? I wanted to read one of my favorite poems from here, which is in the section called A Seal, a Key. And the poem is called There You Are. There you are, this cold day, boiling the water on the stove, pouring the herbs into the pot, hawthorn, rose, buying the tulips and looking at them, holding your heart in your hands at the table, saying, please, please, to nobody else here in the kitchen with you. How hard, how heavy this all is, how beautiful these things you do, in case they help, these things you do, which, although you haven't said it yet, say that you want to live. Gorgeous. Okay, we're on to my final two categories. If you're still here, thank you so much. I don't know how long this video is. I'm hoping my phone is still even recording, so we're gonna see. This is Milk, Blood, Heat by Dantiel W. Moniz. This book is Florida. It's Black girlhood. It's Black womanhood. It's messy, sticky, hot, visceral, sensory. This book hums with aliveness. Some books are very, they're written beautifully and they might make you think. And this book does those things as well, but it is also a book that really feels alive. It feels fleshy. I think there's about 13 stories, and they range from loneliness and miscarriage and sibling dynamics and broader family dynamics. This is another that I want to reread. Now on to the very last book. This is the book that I'm most excited to read this year. This is The Nursery by Szilvia Molnar. I actually don't know where this author is from. Oh wow, and it's a signed copy. Amazing. I mean, it does say that on the front. I picked it up in a second-hand bookshop as I was heading home from work one afternoon, and this is classic. Judging a book by its cover, but also by its title. I just saw the spine, The Nursery, and I said, sign me up. I love reading about motherhood, children, so this already was a bit of me. Then I saw the cover. This cover, I mean, I don't know if you can see that very well, but it's so interesting. And I feel like we don't always get great covers, but this to me was signifying being held and the tenderness of care, but also quite disembodied at the same time. And what is the loss or the absence that is present within this sort of holding. The blurb of the book says, in her cramped New York apartment, a mother wilts beneath the intense August heat, struggling to adapt to her role as the silent interpreter of her newborn baby's needs. The walls of her home seem to press ever closer as she thinks about what she has left behind. She knows there was a life before motherhood, if only she could remember what it felt like. A lifeline emerges in the unexpected form of Peter, her ailing upstairs neighbour who hushes the baby with his oxygen tank in tow. Both are confined to the oppressive apartment building. Both are running out of time. So that is The Nursery. I will let you know when I've read it. So we made it to the end. Thank you so much for sticking around and listening to me talk about some of my books. I hope you've got a bit of a better sense about me and hopefully what you can expect from this channel. I was meant to say it at the beginning, but I wanted to shout out a few of my favorite booktubers. I discovered booktube during the pandemic, and it became a real comfort for me, but also a source of inspiration, not only in terms of finding new books, but being excited about books and wanting to talk to other people about them online. So I will leave their channels in the description box. That is Ebony, Kat from Cat's Field Notes, and Maria from Strange Lucidity. Please go and check out their channels. They are fantastic. I hope you get as much out of them as I do. My next video will be out soon. Maybe next week, maybe in a couple of weeks. I'm trying to work out what my schedule will be. But if you did enjoy what you've seen today, please hit that subscribe button. Leave me a comment in the description box if you've read any of these books and what you thought about them, or if there are any books that you're thinking of picking up. And until then, thank you so much. Take care and see you soon. Bye.